for joining this month's Leadership Live. I am absolutely excited to have really an industry expert and a fellow Florida State Seminole. So we gotta give a little shout out to the Knowles. We actually made bowl for the first time in years. But Andrew Davis, who's also the CCO of Silk Road Medical. Thanks so much, Andrew, for joining us on this episode of Leadership Live. I appreciate you being here.
Happy to be here. Thank you for the opportunity.
Yeah, absolutely. So I've been lucky enough to get to know you, over the last couple of years, but I'm sure there's a lot of listeners and people on this call or listening after the fact that might not know you. So, tell us a little bit about yourself, your background, and a little bit, of course, about where Silk Road. Love to learn.
Yeah, sure. As I was thinking about this question and reflecting on a little bit about myself, it reminded me how old I am. I've been in this business for almost 30 years. I just can't believe that. I took the traditional 30 years ago, pharma and consumer was sort of the way that you broke into the business. So I started with Johnson & Johnson, McNeil Consumer Products, had a very short tenure there. And about 18 months into that role, I discovered medical device, and I had the opportunity to work for Boston Scientific in their MedTech division, which was their original peripheral division that covered everything from drainage catheters, ports, PICCs, all the way through angioplasty balloons and vena cava filters. And that was a very, very formative 7-8 years of my career. And I'm always reminded of the talent that came out of that organization. As I kind of look around today, there are CCOs, CEOs. When I say talent, that excludes me. But ironically, Erica Rogers, who's our CEO here at Silk Road, she and I were sales reps together back in those days. So she's obviously done way better than I have. I had a short stop at Guidant. That was sort of my first sort of taste of startup when they were starting their peripheral division. And then I went to Medtronic for 15 years. And that was a really amazing experience. I was one of the first 5 people hired to take on their endovascular, AAA and thoracic product line as a frontline sales rep, just to see that transformation of open to endovascular. And there's a story here, was really where I got my bug. And then throughout my years at Medtronic, I had the opportunity to sort of follow that open to endo, lots of different tours of duties and different jobs and roles. And my last job at Medtronic was to commercialize their TAVR division. So frontline, creating the strategy, the hiring the first group of sales managers and sales reps. And again, that was a really open to endovascular technology with aortic valve replacement for those aortic stenosis patients. So I got some startup bug in those formative years, and that's how I ended up at Silk Road. Silk Road is an amazing therapy that is in the stroke prevention business, and again, we're really trying to move from that open carotid endarterectomy to a minimally invasive therapy that prevents stroke, has blood, reverses the flow of blood. And it's a really safe way to tackle patients that have carotid artery disease. And I've been here for 7.5 years and had no idea what to expect other than, we were going to create something from the ground up, and we've done that. And we went public in 2019, and we have grown to roughly 70 sales reps now. And it's been a really amazing experience to watch this paradigm shift in treatment of carotid artery disease. So that's a little bit about me.
Yeah, that's great. That's a great trajectory. I love the fact you had the startups, some of the bigger companies, but there were startups within there. So you've gotten that startup bug. You've had the big company experience. You've seen a lot of leaders. Some you worked with as sales reps that are now your leader.
Yep.
So I'm curious. I know a lot of people. What do you think are the key attributes to be a good leader here in med device?
Yeah. I mean, there are. This could be an hour conversation with itself, but I'll try to synthesize it down into sort of my belief systems. And one is, and I think the most important is authenticity. And there's a lot of arguments about whether it's a learned skill or whether it's a developed skill. But at the end of the day, authenticity and leadership is a really critical attribute. And and that sort of lends to being vulnerable. I think vulnerability in a to be a good leader, uh, to ask questions, not be so prideful that you're the boss, that there aren't a lot of good ideas and you're not going to have the solution and answer to everything, which also leads to sort of that. I think it's that daring greatly to make decisions, move fast. Don't be afraid of failure. So that sort of that fail fast, dare greatly and fail fast. And I think you constantly have to have this curiosity of a 2-year-old, I call it, the why.
Right. Uh-huh.
Ask why, ask why. And then finally, don't get stuck. Constantly reinvent yourself, constantly deprogram, because that's how you grow. And I think those are all great attributes to great leaders,
Yeah. No,
among many others for sure.
yeah, no, but I think it's really that vulnerability that you mentioned, that humility, that cascades into a lot of those, being able to ask the why, not having to feel like you need to know it all,
Yeah.
In fact,
Yeah.
Reagan, one of my favorite presidents, said, if I'm the smartest man in the room, I know the first problem, and
Yeah. I love Ronald Reagan, so that's a great advice to live by for sure.
Absolutely. No, I appreciate that. And guys, I'm going to ask some of the questions, but if you're listening in, you have some questions, which I'm sure you will for Andrew. We're going to take a moment at the end of this and pull those in. All you have to do is just put your question in the comment below, and we'll be able to pull it in at the end of this, end of our conversation here. So make sure, put a couple comments, shout outs to Andrew, and we'll pull those in here at the end. So, Andrew, one of the questions that, you've had you said a 30-year career, and I'm sure there was a couple lessons, mistakes, errors, things you wish to take back, whatever you want to call it, that occurred. So can you share a couple of those landmine locations so other leaders don't hear the click?
Sure. It's really interesting. I think we all have a compass, an internal compass that guides us. And as I was growing up in this business, my compass, if you imagine north, south, east, and west, was power, money, title, and winning at all costs.
Mm-hmm.
And in those sort of drove my behaviors and my decision making, and lessons learned along the way were leaving companies that maybe I should have given a little bit more time, or I was too focused on everything and everybody around me that was being promoted, and why were they being promoted and I wasn't being promoted, and why does this person having success and maybe I'm not, their quota is this, so I think you can get really caught up if your compass is that. But as you mature and you get older, my compass has changed to family, faith, health, and friends.
Mm-hmm.
And you can fill in the blank for whatever your compass is and how it can change as far as your north, south, east, and west. But I have really learned that if I use that as my driving directions, then everything else sort of takes care of itself.
Yeah.
And I read a really good quote over the years that I really I share often, and I'm going to share here. And it's imagine life as a game in which you are juggling 5 balls in the air: work, family, health, friends, and faith. Work is a rubber ball. If you drop it, it will bounce back. But the other 4 balls are made of glass, and they will shatter if dropped. So it's a good. So there's a lot of lessons I've had, but as soon as I realized what my true compass was, it just made things a lot easier to sort of deal with as I've gone through my career.
That's great. I experienced the same thing, and I call them the 5 F's, and I think of it as a wheel.
Yep.
If they're out of balance, you might be able to go a little bit further, but eventually something's going to break down. Right? It's like a wheel in a car, right? If it's flat, you're going to break down eventually.
Right.
So you got to keep that wheel round and make sure you're feeding all of those areas in your life, or you're not going to be in for the long game, right?
Exactly.
So, yeah,
Exactly.
awesome. I like that. I've heard that the juggling balls, and I don't think I've heard the glass one though, so that's good. I'll have to steal that from you. But now, come to something, you have high performers, in an organization, that you want to develop up to be the next leaders. What have you done? What have maybe a leader's done for you to develop high performers? You might suggest to educate this group here.
Yeah, so I think there's one critical characteristic that I try to develop in my high performers, and really develop, but also build upon, and that is confidence. There's a book called Confidence. I read the book, and confidence is king. We've all heard that, over and over in our career. But I think to build confidence, a couple things: the critical thinking skills, problem solving skills. Those are extremely important to develop confidence, because what those do is, if they can think critically, if they can problem solve, they will take more chances. They will fail. They will learn from failures, but you'll also learn from making good decisions and winning too. And I sort of have this rule of thumb with everyone I work with. I just call it the power of 3 to 5 questions. So before you call me, or before you call a cross-functional person, while you're trying to figure something out, sit down and think about the 3 to 5 questions that person is going to ask you. And oftentimes you can solve the problem yourself. You can have a different critical pathway in which you will approach the situation. But it really gets you to think, how and why and what and when, all the things that, versus just calling, saying, hey, I've got a problem, I need you to solve it for me. So I think that really, the people that can grasp that concept, they get confident quicker. They're willing to take more risks. They're not scared to fail. And those are the people that I see really raise to the top very quickly.
That's really interesting, and it's really teaching that person to fish, right? And showing them that they can do it, and not needing, well, I haven't heard back from XYZ, so I can't do anything about it, right?
Right.
They've done it, they've answered it, and it gives them that confidence,
Right.
which then the next occasion is like, I got this, I can figure this out.
Exactly.
I like that a lot. Hey guys, and please, if you have questions, that we're not hitting, or additional questions on some of these key things, comment below. We're going to bring those up here at the end. Now, the next topic is one that's obviously near and dear to my heart, in our world of talent. It's so important. But what's the best ways you use to find and then evaluate, new talent?
Right. That's a great question. I have a very simple equation. I try not to overcomplicate it. I look for the skill, the will, and the fit for the organization, the need that I'm solving for with my company or the job. And within that, I try to find common sense, business sense, and what I'll call street or spidey sense. And those are a variety of different questions to get to those levels of just the common sense, business sense, and street sense. But I like good storytellers. I like people that can articulate their real world experiences. I learned this back in my Boston Scientific days when I was interviewing with them. They literally asked me, take me back to the 5th grade. Were you a leader? How were you a leader? Why were you a leader? What were the things what you did? How did this cascade throughout your career in high school, college, business? So people that can actually articulate their experiences and actually can articulate the things that shape them and who they are and why they are, what motivates them. To me, that then you can match that to the skill you need, to the will you need, to the fit you need within your organization. So I keep it very simple in that vein.
Yeah, very interesting. Yeah, Mike Zafarowski, in an interview that I had, he was the chairman of the board at the time. I interviewed with him for a leadership role, and he asked me, what leadership positions did you have in high school? So I've never heard the young leadership question until him, and now before. But his reasoning later on is he said about 80% of the time you kind of are who you are, back then. And it just transcends the right. There's 20% that aren't. We vet that out, but that was one question that gets you kind of 80% there on leadership. And I thought that was intriguing. So Boston Sci must have had the same concept or went to the same interviewing school, whichever. I'd never heard that.
That's correct.
No, but I've heard that skills, hills, I call them wills, right? And those three elements, to be able to find those right type of talent.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
There's not a lot that's original in this business. You just you try to figure out what makes sense and what you need when you need it. So I just try to latch on to different themes and I think that seems to work really well.
Yeah. And people have a tendency to overcomplicate it, right? The more you can simplify it, the better you're going to be able to make the decision, because a confused mind usually says no, or you make a bad one. So the more you can simplify those rubrics, the more effective they can become.
For sure. Exactly.
There are a lot of people on this that aren't leaders today, right? That are listening in, but they want to be. They want to be tapped, right? So what should they do?
Number one, going back to, what did I learn? Pay no attention to the people around you that are getting promoted and worrying about how they got promoted and why they got promoted. That will only lead you down a rabbit hole that will drive you bonkers. So, I really encourage people to focus on their why. To really understand why they want to be a leader. And once they really understand why they want to be a leader, then you can figure out what are the things I need to do to be thought of as a potential leader in the organization or for wherever you're trying to aspire to. But your individual brand and how you interact among your peers and how you interact among your cross-functional team members. I've had so many experiences in my career where somebody wants to be a leader, they want to be promoted, but they haven't raised their hand to do anything. They don't have any exposure, among the cross functions. No one knows who they are. Yeah, they may put some points on the board from a sales perspective, but we all know that the best salespeople aren't always the best leaders. That's true. It's a cliche, but it's true. And so there should be, the things you should do is less about, there should be no doubt that when an organization sits down and says, hey, we need a regional manager, we need an RVP, who do you believe should be that? Your people should promote you. Your peers should promote you because of the things that, not just one thing you've done, but your brand, all the things you've done. So there should be no doubt that you are that person in your organization that should get the nod for that if you're really, looking at the opportunity holistically.
Right. That's, and I love the way you started that, which was start with your why. Because if your why to be in leadership is you truly want to, help and develop people and motivate people, well, you don't need to have the title to start doing your why today.
That's great. That's a very good point.
Right. And so I love that. And if you're doing your why today, you naturally then are seen as, well, he's already, he's kind of my de facto leader now. He's the guy I always go to advice, or she's always the one that's giving me good advice or supported me when it was tough. Right. So of course I want them to have that role.
Right. Or it shouldn't be, well, Susan got promoted. I should be promoted. There should be a lot more substance to your why, but I think you nailed it.
Yeah, that's awesome. I love that. So, got a little fun one for you here. Favorite superhero.
Oh, you threw this one at me here. Okay.
Yeah, and why? So, got to keep you on your toes in the world of Marvel and all this. You got a lot to choose from these days. So,
look, this isn't super original, but Superman. I mean, come on. I mean, yeah. I think the power to fly. And to get anywhere you want as quickly as you can, the freedom that offers, and the ability to help people, and just obviously the other strengths that Superman has. He was just a really good guy with a good a big heart who really just wanted to make the world a better place. So
Yeah.
he encompasses all the things that I think a superhero should have. So
I'd agree with that. That big heart, and I can also tell you're a guy that has spent too much time in a TSA line. That the idea of just being able to fly to that next meeting, it's super. It just that's really resonating for you.
well, I've asked Erica for a NetJet account, but she won't give it to me. So she's like, you have a Southwest frequent flyer number. That's good
Right,
enough.
right, and a companion card, so you're fine.
Yeah,
You
yeah,
know.
exactly.
Perfect, perfect. Well, I've got a couple questions here from the FloodGate family, and guys, if you do have additional questions, just type them in the feed here in the comments below. We'll be able to pull up some of the questions from the FloodGate family. So who do we have here? It looks like you got a friend here that it just appreciates. Good to hear from you.
Hey, Laurel. Yeah.
It looks like you guys need to catch up. We got Brad, who's kind of getting, what's the biggest final stage of Silk Road today in today's current marketplace, and how are you and your team addressing it? So,
Yeah,
question, Brad.
that's a good question, Brad, and thanks for asking. I think the overarching, I call it the re-assimilation into post-COVID world and what it really is going to be and what it's not going to be, and all the things that have changed over the last 2.5, 3 years as we've been battling the pandemic. So, I think being a publicly traded company, to be able to predict things to absolute perfection and trying to figure out how the world's going to work has been the biggest challenge, because we just don't know. And then there's always that looming sort of risk of, well, what happens if this happens again, or pieces and components of it happen again. We're obviously in the midst of a resurgence of COVID again, and the flu, and the RSV, and how that's going to impact the marketplace and access and labor supply, or labor issues in the hospitals and supply chain. So I think just trying to figure out how we're going to reassimilate, and how are we addressing it? Obviously, it's control the controllable. We've really wrapped our arms around our team to let them know that the quality of our business, the tip of the spear, is the patient and the customer and that experience, and you have total control of that. So focus on the core business, and everything else will take care of itself in the category that we mark as uncontrollable.
Yeah.
So control the controllables.
Yeah, I know that makes total great sense. I mean, you can get all balled up and worry about this, about that, about access, whatever. But ultimately, you're there solving the problem.
Yeah.
And you're focused on solving that problem, getting to the people that are most acutely aware of that issue, and helping them do that. The rest usually comes, usually slower than you ever want, at least for us sales-driven type A people, but the fundamentals usually get there, right?
Exactly.
So,
Exactly.
Good. Well, I got a question here from Jacqueline, kind of getting back to that leadership. Who's a favorite leader that you've had, or or you think of, and what do you learn from them?
Okay. So I don't want to hurt anybody's feelings that I've been in touch with.
It's just the first one that comes to head. We'll just put the disclosure there, right?
This is like my son and daughter asking me who I love the most.
Right.
I love all my leaders, current included, and all my past leaders, that have impacted my life the same. But I've always been a real curious student of the game as it relates to styles, process, how they communicate, when they communicate, what they communicate. So, I really like open, transparent communication. It's really easy to only tell people what you think they want to hear or need to hear. But I think if you can build the trust that you need to build with your team, and you have confidence that they will be able to handle the news, good or bad, whether it's private, secret, this is you're under the tent. So what I've learned the most is that open, transparent communication is critical, and people can handle a lot more than you think that they might be able to handle.
Yeah.
So keeping it inside because they don't know if they're going to be able to handle that, or they're not going to be able to process this and do the things I want them to do because they're going to be worried. So I think that has been sort of one of the biggest things I've learned over the years, as far as leadership, and one key takeaway
Yeah.
among
No.
many.
Yeah, no, that's it's such a great point because it was that old school, I would call it, kind of thought where keep it close, only need to know basis, right? And in reality, people are always smart enough to realize something's going on.
Yeah.
And in darkness, they have a tendency to see monsters.
Yep.
So the best thing you can do is shine light on the reality, be transparent, and it goes back to your first initial point. If you're humble, you're not going to say I know it all. You're going to seek other people's advice. You're going to be, curious, all those good things. So
it's not for everybody. I mean, I've had, it's not for everyone, and but because if it goes back to sort of my dare greatly and sort of concept is not everybody can handle it, but you can sense that, and then that, okay, I need to wrap my arms around this person, or this person needs a little bit more detail behind what is being shared here to make them feel more comfortable or to understand it. But yeah, I agree. Darkness does not breed confidence, and darkness does not breed trust.
Right, absolutely. Well, guys, let's see. Anyway, if there's no other questions, we're coming at the top of the hour. Oh, we got one more here. Here you go from Leah Neff. What has been Silk Road's most significant challenge in building the sales team from the ground up?
Yeah. So one of the things I'm obsessed with, among many things, is the culture, and sort of that really give a beep mentality. So we are extremely selective about who we bring into the organization. And when you take a talent pool that's that's way out here, and you try to pull it into here, and then you overlay that in a specific market with specific background, it becomes really challenging. Joe, you and I talked about this on the onset, just that needle in a haystack, because we're so selective. So really, trying to find that needle in a haystack in markets. And then also what's been really challenging is, look, I mean, the world has been really unstable and crazy, and so people are they're kind of locking in and settling in where they are, and their risk profiles have really shrunk up, and so they're sort of, there's a little bit of complacency out there among some really high flyers and good people, that they're just, I'm going to stay where I am and sort of figure it out, because I don't want to take a risk right now, because who knows what's going to happen. So that's been a challenge as well.
Yeah, you got to. We found that as well. It's just finding that unique individual, and getting to pick their head up, have the conversation is difficult. But then also that finding them has the right attitude, not just an attitude, but an attitude that fits the culture of the organization.
Right.
And you and I mentioned right before this, something we've instituted is we survey our clients, right? Find out what their unique culture is. Ask questions that tease out to make sure not just they're a good, the right kind of individual, but are they the right culture for this company to stay in, right? So, because everyone's got their feeling. One last question, and we'll call at the end here. Interview: can you see through a person who's telling you what they think you want to hear versus being straightforward with their experience? It's a good question. Can you kind of read behind the lines, if you will?
Yeah. That comes back to spidey sense and that street smarts. That yes, I can oftentimes, because if you ask the second and third, if you just take what they're saying for what it is, it's easy just to kind of move past it. But if you ask a second, a third, a fourth question, typically the story, the experience gets a little shadier and shadier as far as it relates to details around the experience. So yeah, I mean, obviously we get fooled sometimes, but for the most part, if you're willing to kind of dig into the second and third level question, you can typically sniff out, the BS.
I would agree. I mean, could you tell me a time when question, if, the generalities are easy to fake, but you get to a specific, those little details, if they're not real, they come out pretty easy, pretty quickly, right?
In a lot of interviewers, and I'm guilty of this on occasion. I just take the first answer at surface level, and then we move on. But if there are certain things that are important, I highly encourage you to dig deeper.
Perfect. Good. Well, we are at the end of our time. Andrew, thank you so much. Thank you for everyone for putting the questions and for listening. If something you missed or you're watching this later, comment below. We'll be monitoring. If there's questions we can answer, we'll reach back out and provide some of that insight for you. So, everyone, I appreciate you joining. Andrew, thanks for giving of your 30 years of leadership at Med Device and giving insights. And I hope everyone has gotten a couple arrows to put in their quiver so they can be a better leader and impact people today. So,
thank you,
Andrew. Have a great day. Thank you, everybody.
Take care.